All right, you're very welcome along to this week's RTÉ Rugby podcast, joined as usual by Bernard Jackman, and Sean Cronin is with us this week. Guys, thanks a million for joining us. Hope you're well.
Yeah, good to chat. All good, Neil, thanks.
Birch, I might start. I was reminded of the famous quote there in the last couple of days. There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. I think that is very much the case this week in the world of rugby. Where are we going to start? I'll throw this one out to the floor because we've got a long list here. We've got head coach sacking, so Eddie Jones in at Australia, Dave Rennie out, and also then as well, John O'Gibbs out at Claremont. That's probably quite far down our list. On any other week, it probably will be a little bit higher up. Champions Cup round 3 reviews, round 4 previews. We've got red cards dominating the games at the weekend, 5 across the Champions Cup. 6 nation squads are being announced this week. Ben Healy's called up by Scotland. We went into good detail on that as well. They've also brought in Rory McConaughey. France have a lengthy injury list. Ireland naming their 6 nation squad tomorrow. And we've got central contracted players not getting games for the provinces. Where will we start?
Well, look, you've got a former coach and a coach of potential, a massive potential on the pod. So let's start with coaches. I'm the former coach, by the way. Look, I think it's mad. It's amazing how things can change. So probably the last couple of World Cup cycles, there's been this sense that you stick at what you have. You back them to come right at the appropriate time, and then you make your change. Whereas, we've seen obviously Pivac, Jones going, Rennie going, and that's opened up the opportunity for Jones to get a second bite with Australia. It's opened up an opportunity for Gatland to get a second bite with Wales, and obviously Borthwick and Sinfield coming into England, which is frightening really, because I think England have such a big bounce in performance. They're just waiting to happen. And I think if one of these are successful, or 2 or 3 are successful at this World Cup, it will just change the whole landscape for professional international rugby coaches for the next 4 years, because they'll always be looking over their shoulder, probably less likely to go hard on development year 1 and year 2, to be honest, and become very, very focused on the day-to-day results. And it's amazing. I'm clued into a lot of the Aussie stuff and the media stuff and how this happened. And this has been going on, back in the summer. Eddie Jones went to the CEO's house for a dinner. Didn't want to go to a hotel because it would have been seen. So that flirtation has been happening for a while, and I feel sorry for Rennie, to be honest, because he had an unbelievable injury crisis, and like they came to Europe this November without a lot of their key players, and we're far from walkovers. I mean, we were quite lucky to beat them. We took a late Ross Byrne penalty. Should have beaten France. They're just over ambitious. Could have kicked the ball out. So the Italy game where he made whole chain changes was the one that caught him. And speaking to around Wales, Pivac felt that it was the Georgia loss and the Italy loss, in the 6 Nations that cost him. So effectively, coaches are now going to say, look, one mishap and it could just put the whole thing into jeopardy. But and then I think John's a very good coach, but like, people need to understand that he was brought to Claremont to clean it up and to fix it and to rebuild it. And he dealt with some of the aging players problem. He tried to find some new talent, and unfortunately it was going to get worse before it got better, and the board shit the pants, and he's gone now, and the new guy will start again. So sometimes that delays things rather than actually speeds it up. So it's certainly going to be interesting having Eddie Jones back, for the World Cup from a media point of view is obviously gold, and I'd be interested. I think Australia were ready to have a big World Cup anyway. But it'll be just interesting how Eddie goes, and has he the ability to, I suppose, get a new team ready in a very short space of time.
Yeah, and Sean, I think it's probably the timing that caught everyone by surprise with the Eddie Jones and Dave Rennie stuff in the last few days, because I think there was a general consensus that Dave Rennie was under a fair degree of pressure throughout November, and once he probably got through the first few weeks of December unscathed, it seemed like, okay, they're probably going to stick with him at this rate. But obviously, it seems, reading back through what's been said now the last couple of days, the plans, really, the talks with Eddie Jones have been going pretty much since he was sacked by England. They've been making the move towards getting him in, and it probably just seems at this rate like Australia probably were set with Dave Rennie until the World Cup, but once Eddie Jones became available, it was probably strike while the iron is hot and just jump on him and get him on board.
Yeah, I suppose, look, there is little bits of info being drip fed out this week in terms of, that surprised me a lot that there was ongoing talks 12, 14 months ago with Eddie Jones and the Australian Rugby Union, which, Dave Rennie was cursed with injuries, especially on that November tour. And like Bert said, not too far off beating France. Obviously, the Italy game where they made wholesale changes, thought performed really well against Ireland, unlucky, and then beat Wales. So, when Eddie was leaving England, I felt I was going to get my withdrawals from not being able to watch his press conferences. But, I'd say we're set for another interesting year with Eddie in charge of Australia. But, I was quite surprised with that. But again, I think he's a good guy to come into an environment like that in this short space of time and get us, like, they're always dangerous at a World Cup. So if there's a character there to bring in to try and fix up, I suppose, a few areas in the Australian setup, it will be Eddie Jones.
That's the kind of scary thing I've been thinking of as well, Birch, that if there probably is one coach out there who you want to bring in, I know he's on a 5-year contract and it's not just going to be a short-term thing, but if there is someone out there who you want to come in and get that short-term bounce, it kind of feels like Eddie Jones is right up there on the list of candidates you'd be making.
Yeah, he is for sure. And like, there is talent there. It's interesting. Part of the reason it seems that they went for him or weren't happy with Rennie was just, straight batting all the questions in press conferences. Rugby Union wasn't, featuring on the news. And and the CEO, he spoke about how Eddie Jones is going to get him back in the media spotlight. And already he's come out and said, his first target is to go and get some, rugby league guys who had a strong Rugby Union background back. And that's caused a bit of a spat with the NRL teams, and that Eddie will do that. Eddie will get you in the paper. It's just can he do it? Can he get the team functioning? And it's going to be a very different way of playing. Like Rennie, in fairness to him, whether it's at the Chiefs, whether it's at Glasgow, had a very positive attitude towards attacking rugby. And Eddie talked about it over the last year with England, but we didn't see any of it really. I mean, he struggled to get it right. Now he's very smart technically and tactically, so and there's no doubt he can do it, and he did it with Japan. But it's just going to be getting him in, ready in a short space of time. Like Dave Rennie had a camp last week, did a 2.5 day or 3 day camp with the squad, planning for the World Cup. And Eddie would have his own plan, so that was a way. So it's definitely tight. But look, with someone like Eddie Jones, you've got status, you've got belief in himself, and you've got a track record of being at World Cup. So if anyone can do it, he can do it. And likewise with Gatlin going back to Wales, he announced the squad yesterday. There's still a core of the players that know him well and trust him, and maybe he can get them back to where they were at. But the challenge for Gatlin is, and he was quite public on it, he wanted to bring Rob Howdy back. WRU wouldn't back him. He wanted to bring he obviously worked with Robin and Sean Edwards for a long time. So the band aren't back together. It's Warren with a new band, and how that works, and given the lack of probably new talent in Welsh rugby or lack of depth in Welsh rugby, that may not be as easy as it will be for Eddie Jones and Borthwick, who you feel have two squads that are capable of a little bit better. How much I presume are we all hoping that Australia and England are meeting in a World Cup quarterfinal next September, October? Yeah, I think I want that more than anything else in the World Cup, possibly even more than what I want Ireland to do well. I think I just want to see England and Australia play each other.
It'll be good viewing, like Bert said, from a media standpoint in terms of having Eddie Jones out there. But I watched Borthwick's press conference this week and was just super impressed with him. And again, like Bert had said about this approach to the 4-year cycle of a World Cup, and I suppose that was Eddie's go-to whenever they didn't have performances in November. We're building for the World Cup. Borthwick, every game matters for England. We're playing Scotland in 19 days' time. Obviously there's going to be in the background some forward thinking, but him coming in there along with Sinfield is going to really, I think, make England a massive threat in the Six Nations. So Yeah, it'll be interesting, I suppose. Look, the Six Nations just around the corner, so more, I suppose, focus on that than Eddie Jones v England in the World Cup.
Yeah, I'd say the Netflix executives are wondering, have they backed the wrong tournament now? Should they be putting all, should they be doubling up and do some stuff with the rugby
Well,
championship?
you got Razzie, Cheika, Eddie Jones, and look at Joe. Joe's obviously interesting, but the Kiwis are a little bit. They're not as how would you say it? They're not as good at stirring things up. But Cheika,
You need a good straight man in any of these.
Yeah,
these
true. Actually,
acts,
good cop. But just on the Eddie Jones thing, I mean, what were the RFU thinking? Not putting them on gardening leave or having a non-compete clause. You know what I mean? Even to the extent of you can't coach a team who are on our side of the draw or a tier 1 country. I mean, to pay out a guy and then allow him go back in and coach a team that you have a strong chance of running into seems absolute madness.
I saw Bill Sweeney of the RFU quoted as saying it was they didn't agree with it morally to put in a clause like that in the contract. I mean,
yeah, it's very
I think Eddie Jones' lawyer did a hell of a job. I mean,
one final point on this one though, Birch, Dave Rennie, what are the options for him next? I think there had been talk anyway in the last few weeks about him potentially going off to Japan after the World Cup anyway and coaching out there. What sort of options? Where do you think we could kind of see him land in the next year or so?
Look, I think he's a very good coach. I genuinely do. And speaking to people who've worked with him in Glasgow and the Chiefs and Australia, I met him in November, and he was under the pump, but he still was, very good with his time because it was the week of the Ireland game. Look, I think it's probably a relief for him. He's obviously going to be disappointed, but the relationship between him and the board was quite poor, and you can see that when they were already tapping up, Eddie Jones. So he's probably gone after the World Cup anyway, and it seems as if he's got a couple of really decent offers in Japan. The Kiwi coaches tend to like Japan because obviously it's big cash, but it also is closer to get home, and it's a shorter season. So maybe having been in Glasgow, been in Australia, he now wants to get that balance right. But I think if any big job came up in France or Ireland or Northern Hemisphere, he's on any shortlist. He's not going to be defined by this, but I think it seems as if his next move was Japan, and probably won't steer away from that.
Is a Leinster senior coaching gig too small for someone coming from head coach of a Test nation, or even John O'Gibbs as well? Are these names, are they a little bit beyond what's available in Ireland at the moment?
I'll let Sean go next, but just quickly, I think Leinster can get whoever they want I think financially, if Leinster decide that person is the one to come in and fit that piece of the jigsaw, or a slightly different piece of jigsaw that Stuart fitted because he's quite unique in his skill set, I think they can. It's one of the best jobs in the world. You're going to win. You're winning 90% of the time. You've got some of the best talent, great facilities, etc. Chance to be champions of Europe. Great stepping stone to an international job again, or within Ireland or elsewhere. So no, I think Leinster can. I think Leinster can go to war with some of the top tier 1 countries if they want to. You know what I mean? But I don't know what Leinster. I don't know what they want next. You know what I mean? Is it promote from within? Is it just bring in an assistant coach for defense, or and have a defense coach and an attack coach with more power? I don't know, but certainly I would say if they weren't on any list last week, they're people that Guy Easterby and Leo Cullen, etc., will be looking at.
Yeah, there'll be phones hopping. Sean, quickly before we move on from all of this, you obviously worked with John O'Gibbs. What could you tell us about what type of a coach he is?
Yeah, look, he's very good coach, very technically solid. Again, look, it's going back to what Bert said. It depends what kind of setup Leinster want to go with next year in terms of the coaching ticket. Whether Leo goes fully director of rugby and bring in a John O'Gibbs type character as the head coach, will say, and then promote within. I've heard a few rumblings in terms of guys potentially coming up, getting promoted from within, but it's whether you have someone in on top of them then overseeing that, linking in with Leo, who looks after a lot of the player management, media, and bits and pieces culturally around the setup. So it'll be interesting. Again, being outside the squad now, I try to distance myself a bit instead of plugging for information. But it will be, from what I've heard, is that guys like Goodman, Sean O'Brien potentially could be getting bumps up, and then whether they bring in someone to oversee that. Like Bert said, Stuart had such a unique skill set in terms of being able to manage attack and defence so seamlessly that it's a big hole to fill. It's just how they go about filling it.
Yeah, and just on Jono, and I think Jono's strength is the technical areas of forward play in particular, and probably, I always felt that maybe that role he was going into in Claremont was going to be a difficult one because he's not the warmest character or the most, the best communicator or whatever. He's very direct, very grunt. And in France, that can be a big weakness, particularly when you're trying to create change. So he could come into a Leinster where everybody is switched on, everybody knows their job, everyone's committed to it, be that direct, type of character. And because of the skill set of other people in the group and how long it's established, people would crave that feedback rather than actually frustrate them. But so I think he's a very clued in, valuable coach. It just depends on the mix you want to and the group you're going to take on.
And Birch, that's why. Sorry to longer on the point. But, that's something that drew Robin McBride to the setup in Leinster.
Yeah,
how much players buy into the detail, willing to learn the detail, all the technical side. So I know we're talking about international coaches, but like the lure of being in the Leinster setup, the quality of player and the level of detail that the players are willing to buy into, it's a big selling point for any top coach that wants to get involved. And
Robin wouldn't have had that in Wales. It's completely different over there. So I can totally see how that makes sense. And also because Robin is there and Leo is an ex-forward, maybe Jono's profile isn't needed as much as it might be somewhere else as well. But look, he's definitely going to be someone that they have to look at.
Yeah, and they won't be the only ones looking at them. On the games at the weekend, before we even talk about the rugby and the results for the Irish side, the red cards and just even the nature of rugby's discipline situation has kind of been a talking point now for a week or 10 days off the back of Owen Farrell going off to tackle school and somehow being back in time for the Six Nations. We had 5 red cards in the Champions Cup at the weekend. We have high-profile players like Luke Cowan-Dickey coming out on Twitter and saying the game is a joke over red cards in matches he's been involved in. It's becoming a bit of a mess all around, Birch, the whole situation around rugby discipline. The players don't seem happy with it. The coaches don't seem happy with it. It seems that probably us on the outside are the only ones that seem happy with how much there's a clamp down on head contact and red cards. But we're kind of caught in this really tough middle ground at the moment, and it's hard to figure out how to get out of it.
Yeah, look, Sean is more recently retired than me, but I think my sense of things is that players and coaches just want to be able to understand with as much detail as possible what the consequences are of things, or how things are going to be interpreted. And I think, we've all been shocked of how there hasn't been a massive change in the amount of, or limitation of the amount of head-high contacts. There's still a huge amount, despite the fact that this has become a big focus, despite the fact that concussion is now very much on the mind of World Rugby, players, parents, etc. So there hasn't been that change, and now there's a real sense of frustration and annoyance with the amount of red cards to a certain extent, and some of it's down to some of it's down to your own team. You know what I mean? If it's your team, so like the Irish are up in arms about a lot of Irish fans are up in arms about Owen Farrell, and potentially being back, or not getting a red card at the time. But like the Johnny incident could have been a red card as well. You know what I mean? And it wasn't. And obviously the weekend there was Jack O'Donoghue from a Munster point of view could have cost Munster the game. But is it a red card? I think it is. But then I saw Les Kiss in the London Irish game where there's 2 red cards, and he was interviewed during the match and he was up in arms saying, he can't see it being a red card. But again, when I look at it, I think it is. So there's just there's just this lack of clarity. And the one that Luke Cowan-Dickey's gone mad about was a red card for extra against the Bulls, which actually this morning or yesterday they've actually decided it didn't warrant a red card. It was more of a seatbelt tackle. So you're having this worry and stress for players and coaches that every time something is referred to a TMO or a citing committee, they're not really sure how it's going to be ruled. What the rule is going to be or the sanction. So that's not good. And to be honest, I in the last week I felt through coaches reaching out to me, asking me to kind of lobby this or float this through media or to World Rugby or whatever, is this sense of, look at, maybe we need to go to the NRL model, which is put players on report. So to keep the game going fast, or to keep 15v15 or sorry, limit the amount of red cards. Not that you can't get a red card, but for certain incidents which are marginal, that the referee or the TMO just says, look, Jack O'Donnell's on report. He's on report. And Monday, in the cold light of day, with 7 different camera angles, no French TV director who's not giving you the angle you want, and they look at that, and potentially the sanction is bigger. But there's an opportunity for the player to argue his case. There's an opportunity for the club to argue their case or whatever, and the game will still be safe, but the immediate sanction doesn't ruin a game. Now, I'm not in favour for this. I just think we just need to get on with it and continue to try and limit the amount of head-eye contacts. But that's certainly, not every coach, but there's a swell of support for that. And I don't know. I think we're getting into the worry coaches have, and I'll let Sean talk now. But the worry coaches have is that a massive game will be decided by a red card, and whether that's Champions Cup or that's a URC final, a World Cup quarterfinal, and it's not the fact that it can be decided by a red card, it's the fact that post red card, it may be deemed that it didn't warrant a red card. That's the big issue, but I'd love to know what Sean thinks, because he's closer to it than I am.
Yeah, Sean, like recently retired player, now recently begun into coaching, so you've been able to see it recently from both sides of the equation. Like, how much has it been drilled into players out in the coaching pitch on a professional level, the importance of getting that height right?
Yeah, well, I suppose if I'm looking at it from my coach's hat on, like from my own experience dealing in Leinster, it was flagged every week. Now, this is why the importance of contact skills coaches has really come to the fore as well. The communication to us every week is you're running the risk if you're going high. You got to get low. That's below the hips if we can. The other thing is as well, in terms of Bert spoke about frustration with supporters, fans. Supporters have to understand that the referees are working off a framework, right? So was it direct contact? Was there force, etc., etc.? They are trying to take out the grey area. That's, in my opinion, more red cards than not, because that's what they're working off of. In terms of the coach, take the London Irish game, for example, at the weekend, the first one. I don't understand why Loader just hasn't dropped his height there. He's running the risk. He's probably hit the guy's shoulder up onto the head. The second one, Kieran Parker with the clean out, just reckless. It's a red card. I know Les Kiss was voicing his opinion, but they're both red cards. So, like, is there constant communication from World Rugby, from the URC, really stressing this topic in terms of players entry into the tackle zone, whether it's with the ruck tackle, because it's turning in now where we have incidents every week. And from a former player's perspective, I can't understand. I always went low. Maybe that's drilled into me over my playing career. I just can't understand why it's players are still going high into contact, because you're running a big risk, not only to affect the overall team performance, but you're going to cop a ban as well. So can't see the debate ending anytime soon, to be honest.
Yeah, and like on that London Irish one, as you were saying, like I don't really think Les Kiss has done the coaches any favors with his reaction to it by saying he was like flabbergasted was the word he actually used on that Loader red card. And I actually think that's one of the easiest red card decisions we're going to see all season. Because
I think it was like 2 or 3 minutes before the next red card as well.
Yeah.
So it was Yeah, poorly timed interview, if anything.
Like it wasn't even one of these situations where it was a split-second incident where a player has dropped down or a player doesn't have the opportunity. Like, he was covering in from the backfield.
Yeah.
And he just kind of ran into him.
Yeah.
And for Les Kiss, then, like, his side have had 5 red cards across the Premiership and Champions Cup this season. That's more than any other team in the Premiership, Top 14, or URC across the 3 major leagues. It's not really a good look to have that coach of all coming out with it if you've had more red cards than anyone else across the season.
Yeah, and look, I think it just goes back to the constant communication from the coaches to the players, and then bringing that into your training practice, into the coaching setup, because that is the only way. It starts in pre-season. You don't start at mid-season after you've had a couple of red cards. It's about planning out, getting the good technique from pre-season, building into the season, maybe showing some clips in terms of, what's done badly, what's done well over the course of the year as well, trying to drill this into your players that this is the way we need to do it going forward in order to limit the risk that you run in terms of losing players, whether it's through a ban or on the pitch at the current time.
Mm-hmm. One final bit I want to bring up on this, and it's probably it's after the red card. It's now we're talking about the bans, Birch, and I kind of wanted to bring it up last week, but we were waiting on a decision for Owen Farrell, and I didn't want to bring it up then when we did. By the time of recording, we didn't know what the actual punishment was going to be on Owen Farrell. But if we were to go back to the Joe Marler incident from a few weeks ago and the suspension he got, one thing I actually found quite interesting with that was, I know a lot of people didn't agree with the length of it, and this is nothing to do with that, but the fact that they suspended some of the weeks of the ban. I actually thought that was a decent way to potentially move forward with a lot of these suspensions, where instead of 6 weeks comes down to 3 because of the good behavior and you said sorry and you behaved yourself at the hearing. I think a lot of people actually find that part of the disciplinary process really, really annoying and really kind of disingenuous at this stage, because it kind of seems if you show up and you act politely at the hearing, that's 1 or 2 weeks gone off the suspension. We see it the whole time. I wouldn't mind seeing a situation where we'd say you get a 6-week suspension, the last 2 weeks of it are suspended for 18 months. Now, if you get another red card inside those next 18 months, you serve those 2 weeks plus whatever your new suspension is going to be as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I've yet to. I think a serial killer would bring tea and biscuits to the hearing. You know what I mean? You want to be absolutely off your head to go there and start kicking up fuss and being an asshole.
Yeah, that's one thing. Who was the last person, or who has ever had in their disciplinary hearing saying,
your name and shame,
we're adding 2 weeks on. We're adding 2 weeks on because their conduct at the hearing was not good.
Whoever it is after getting everyone else off about cumulative about 200 weeks. But no, I think that makes sense. I think that's more realistic than tackle school as well. I mean, I just think that's a bit cheesy, but again, probably look at Les Kiss is a perfect example. He's in a red hot seat. It's very difficult for him to see the wood from the trees, and he's a great fella and a great coach. But it's clear from his remarks that he's struggling. I thought Graham Rowntree, in fairness, just said after Jack O'Donoghue, we got to do better. But you're going to have, different coaches who see things differently. You're going to have players who see things differently because, they feel vilified or their careers are under threat because of this, or the progress in their careers. So I think it's World Rugby, the need to be stronger on it. And I'd have no issue with suspending some of those sentences, but being very hard on the repeat offenders, and there are repeat offenders out there. They don't seem, that doesn't really seem to be taken into account as strongly as it probably should be, because I think, we all have made mistakes. Everyone's capable of making a mistake, getting their angle wrong or not dipping in time. And you serve your punishment, you learn from it, you come back. But for the repeat offenders especially, I think that suspended part of it would be ideal. And look, just to clarify, I'm not in favor of this NRL on report, but there's going to be a bit of a push for that for the next little while. And World Rugby have to decide if they're going to sit tight, hold firm, actually double down to a certain extent, and become stronger on the sanctions and see if that works, or if they're going to veer left or right and see if they can find a different way of doing it.
I'll give final word to you, Sean. Like Birch is floating that idea that some coaches are in favor of potentially getting rid of red cards, putting something on report. What would your thoughts be on that?
To be honest, I don't know. I'm not a massive watcher of rugby league, but in terms of what does clarify a red card then in terms of the rugby league or the NRL, Birch? If you're
sorry. So if it's a real violent act, like, and in fairness, they like a deliberate, you're just trying to take someone out, which doesn't happen all the time, but there's times when you can see that there's a bit of grudge and someone goes loose. A spear tackle, something that's highly dangerous would be red, right? So they're not taking reds out of the game, but those ones where maybe a clear out, which isn't just head contact or whatever, where there's maybe mitigating circumstances, they're the ones that will go report. But no, there's still, like, if a fight, as I said, a spear tackle, a no arms head high contact would go. But there's other ones where there's a 2-man tackle and there's a head collision, which is dangerous, but maybe not 100% deliberate. That goes on report.
Okay. I suppose, Neil, from my point of view, I'd like to see us get the current system cleaned up. And again, I'll go back to with the coach's hat on. That needs to be cleaned up. Like, I suppose it's hard to get a feel of what every club is doing, but there needs to be some accountability in terms of what is being coached to the players. Mm-hmm. Because, and a big thing as well as a repeat offender, like Bert said, this thing of getting weeks off, if you've been up in front of a disciplinary committee 2-3 times, is outrageous, because the punishment needs to fit the crime in terms of if you keep doing it 2-3 times, because no one's going to learn then and nothing's going to improve with the situation.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what, if anything, happens over the next few months. Let's talk about some actual rugby, because there was a good bit played over the weekend as well. I'll start with Leinster's win against Gloucester, because I've been accused in the past of this podcast of not talking about Leinster enough. And in fairness, I do agree, we probably actually don't talk about Leinster enough, because they just tend to go about their business so comfortably and without any kind of, remarkable incident. Everyone just seems to play at a pretty decent level and they get the job done pretty easily. But it was another fairly comfortable win, flexed the muscles a few times against Gloucester. I do want to talk, though, Birch, about Jamie Osborne, who just continues to look really, really impressive. And the one thing that is struck me about him is his try at the weekend, for example. That was only his second Leinster try. And I think when a lot of these young players break onto the scene, we will talk a lot about, or a lot of the conversations we'll have about them is about how much they're scoring and how much they're involved in these big moments. And I think it says a lot about someone like Jamie Osborne for his age, that he's only scored 2 Leinster tries at this stage, but he's someone we've been talking about continually now for the guts of a year. And I think that says a lot about just how probably mature and comfortable he's looking in the Leinster team. Yeah,
for sure. And they've had big raps on him, and Sean would have been there when he broke through, but they've had big raps on him for a long time, and like, he's come through the youth system, obviously CBS and Nace Rugby Club, so he wouldn't have had the same training hours, but from that first match he played against Scarlets where he made that massive hit, I just think he's risen to whatever challenge they've put in front of him, and the URC now he's very, very comfortable, and now he looks very comfortable at Champions Cup level, which is another level up, although Gloucester aren't. There's better teams in the URC than Gloucester, but it is another level up in terms of intensity, the pressure to perform, the team you play with, because generally the Leinster are full strength or very close to it for Champions Cup games. And now the question mark is, will he be able to step up to the international level? And to be honest, everything he's done so far, he seems to take it in stride, and I think he can. He definitely, look, if he doesn't get injured, he's going to get capped for Ireland. But you'll be kind of looking at him going, wow, he could be one of those players who goes into the Irish team and looks comfortable from the start, and becomes a very important player for Ireland in time. So he's and look, the problem is, the reason we don't talk about Leinster as much as we do others is because they're generally just motoring along, and there's not any crisis or pressure or whatever, and so but then when you see someone like Jamie come through, I think he's definitely worth talking about.
Yeah, they don't give us enough talking points. Sean, on Jamie Osborne, obviously you would have got to know him and got to play with him a little bit over your last couple of seasons in Leinster. How impressed have you been with him over the last couple of seasons?
Yeah, look, like Bert said, he's kind of just progressed level on level over the last kind of couple of years. When a guy comes into a setup and has the movement of the play and is able to turn the corner well and square defenders up, and you just kind of get a sense that he has something about him. He had that the minute he came into the sessions. Big guy, 6'2", 6'3". Real unassuming guy. I think the biggest work on that Stuart and the coaches were trying to get out of him was to find his voice a bit more, which every young guy coming into an environment like that is just trying to pull that out of them slowly, give him the confidence to speak in meetings. So, it's really exciting to see him come through. Another guy that's kind of been drip fed in over the last couple of years. And I have down here, Brian Deeney kind of coming into squads, Michael Milne at loosehead. So big talent coming through. Probably treat those three guys at different stages now. Like, is Jamie Osborne ready to step up to the next level in terms of could he be in the squad tomorrow? So like you said, Leinster have been motoring pretty well, even with the retirement of some key guys last year. They're going okay, so it's impressive the way they're just, every week consistency and performance across all the areas.
Yeah, it's remarkable they haven't fallen apart now when we think about it with the players they lost in the summer.
Can't work it out in my mind.
Finally on Osborne though, like as you said, there's a Six Nations squad tomorrow. Is there, like, he's trained with Ireland before, he was involved with the A's as well back in November. Do you see him being able to sneak into that squad for the Six Nations, or is it just a little bit too early?
It's hard to know. It's Andy Farrell's not afraid to make big decisions like that, and obviously we've heard some rumblings come out this week, whether they're true or not, just around, I suppose, Bundy at Connacht, and but his versatility will obviously play in his favour. Like, he's played full back at 20s level, 12 now, 13. So, it's a call that Andy Farrell could make. I suppose we'll just have to wait and see what happens tomorrow. But like Bert said, he's going to get capped sooner rather than later. It's just whether it's during the Six Nations or not.
Going to your head, Bert, is Ross Byrne in the squad tomorrow morning?
Yeah, I think you carry him. Johnny will be fine, but there's obviously hasn't been playing, so I think you go with 4.
Okay.
You go with 4 to start and see where you're at. And Ross obviously finished November with a real positive, and he's got game time now and has been going well. So I think he'll be in for sure. Yeah.
Moving on then, another player who's made a real good push after having disappointment in November. We're going down to Munster now. Gavin Coombs, who was dealt a fair blow when he was kind of dropped out of the Ireland squad back in November, but his form since then, Birch, he really seems to have taken that criticism that he probably had and taken that feedback, and he's really contributing, not just in the 22 where he's scoring loads of tries, but contributing around the pitch a lot for Munster in the last few weeks.
Yeah, no, he's been brilliant, and exactly what you want from any player, but particularly a young player who, when you come into the scene first, it can be quite easy sometimes, no one knows anything about you, particularly someone like Gavin who's got a natural amount of power. And to be honest, I would have been worried about some of his tackle tech. I didn't think he was a great tackler for a back row, but he was very much focused on his what he's world class at, which is carrying. But and obviously that game against the All Blacks didn't go well for him, as not just him, lots of players that night. And he lost out on opportunities to get more minutes. Obviously got some feedback, and he's just reacted in an incredibly positive way. And there's probably, it's a great sign for him, because even the legends of Irish rugby or Munster rugby, like Connor and Peter O'Mahony, from Munster point of view, they would have had times over a career where they had a little dip, or they were questioned or had asked to improve in a certain area, and they did, and now they've had phenomenal careers. And Coombs being able to take that disappointment and come back better, and it wasn't just last weekend against Northampton, where obviously he was very active, 15 carries, but against Northampton away he had 25 tackles, and he led the tackle stats, and he just looks like he's got a better ability to just stay in the game minute by minute, whereas before he was a brilliant man for big moments, and they're important, they're crucial. But I think now he's put his hand up, and Jack Cronin hasn't really had a huge amount of game time. Leinster have obviously been flirting with that Baird, Josh van der Fleer, Doris partnership. So it'll be interesting if he can get minutes in this Six Nations. I love the fact he played lock there a couple of weeks ago as well, because that's obviously going to be really helpful to him in terms of any World Cup squad, having that versatility. So no, full credit to him.
Do you think he's back in the squad tomorrow, Sean?
I'd say so, yeah. And again, going back to that the All Blacks game, 15 game in November, the game didn't go well for a number of guys, but with Coombs, it's his meters in contact is just so impressive, and he's kind of coupled that in now with in terms of his tackle technique, his stats. So he's definitely put himself in the shop window, playing really, really well. Big moments throughout the game. Big moments throughout the game as well. So yeah, I'd be surprised if he wasn't involved in that squad tomorrow.
There were some big calls from Graham Roundtree in that game against Northampton at the weekend. Obviously, Conor Murray and Keith Earls both fit and available, but weren't selected. Two centrally contracted IRFU players, and Birch. That was a big moment in kind of Roundtree's journey as a Munster head coach to make a huge decision like that, and ultimately to get the positive result and positive reaction out of it.
Yeah, absolutely, and fair play to him. It can't have been easy. But I think he has given the youth their opportunity, and he's rewarded the ones who've taken it. And it's far easier to pick Conor Murray than pick Paddy Patterson. You know what I mean? In terms of having that conversation with Paddy Patterson. He obviously will be highly ambitious. He's been going well, but it's easier to let him down than it is to let Conor Murray down. And the hard thing to do is to do what he did. And I think he hasn't put. Look, the results haven't been perfect, but he hasn't made many mistakes. Roundtree, to be fair, you know what I mean. I think he's trying to change how they play. He's brought back in some Munster coaches, and obviously Mossy Lawler coming in next year is another one. And he's blooded youngsters, and he's handled the disappointment pretty well post match. There's been some tight losses, and some very poor performances early on in the year where he could have lost his head and he didn't. And now he seems like he's starting to be able to I suppose break up that old squad and put his own stamp on things. So no, fair play to him.
And then Sean, I'm flying through these next where we are running out of time, but Bundy Aki obviously is the other curious situation here where he's struggling to get into the Connacht team at the moment. I think initially there was probably an assumption that he was being rested, but now that we've gone through a couple of games and it's Cathal Ford who started the last two over him, we don't know what's going to happen this weekend in the Challenge Cup as well. But Pete Wilkins and Andy Friend have been pretty clear that this is a selection call. This is the team that they want to pick at the moment rather than resting Bundy Aki. And for someone who hasn't really actually played that much rugby all season due to the suspension, it's a tricky situation for him to be in coming up towards the Six Nations.
Yeah, to be honest, I suppose with all the policy around players being rested around Christmas and then his ban, I didn't really take much notice until there was a few rumblings in the media or press or whatever this week. Yeah, look, I suppose the coaches are approaching this from a player performance type of viewpoint, where you have those couple of young guys coming in playing really, really well. Tom Farrell going well at 13. So look, when you break it down, Bundy Aki is a British and Irish line, Irish international, undoubted quality. So, if Connacht had a massive URC game this week, would he be slotting in at 12? I probably think he would be. So I don't know whether it's just an approach from the coaches to keep everybody on their toes, keep the level of performance where it is, and drive things that way. But it's hard to know. Like I said, I only heard about it this week, but there's no doubt in the quality that Bundy Aki brings, both from a leadership point of view, culturally around the setup in Connacht. So it's a strange one where you'll have to see how it plays out. But again, I can't see him not being named in Andy Farrell's squad tomorrow. He's such a big part of that Irish setup as well. So it's interesting, but again, we'll have to see how it plays out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we'd certainly, Bert, I don't know if I speak of you, but I'd certainly expect him as well to be in that squad tomorrow. But it's another question then about what a centre pairing looks like in the Six Nations.
Yeah, look, he'll be in, and there'll be no issue with his attitude in Irish squad, because it'll be a breath of fresh air for him if he is going through a bad patch down there, and the quality of players around him will mean it's necessary to have a good attitude, or he'll be told about it. You know what I mean? And that's sometimes the challenge for someone, a British and Irish line in a smaller club to a certain extent, or a smaller province, where maybe it's just a lot of pressure on you all the time to be that voice, to have that energy, to be that star player. And players are human. So I think look, the rumors have been going on for a while, since actually the first game of the season, where he got that red card in South Africa, and he hasn't really hit his straps for. Obviously, he had a suspension, but just hasn't really been firing on all cylinders. I thought against Ulster, he was very quiet over Christmas, and obviously Friendly's is being able to rotate a little bit in the Challenge Cup and get wins, because of the level of opposition, which makes it easier then to double down, and especially if a youngster like Carl Ford coming through, who takes his chance, well, then you go again. But look, there's a lot of history between Bundy Aki and Connacht. There's a huge amount of things he's done incredibly well, and these things can be fixed over a conversation and a handshake, and go again. So I wouldn't see it as being in any way fateful. It's interesting, because we don't hear about it very often in Irish rugby. It's every second week in France there's some player who's gone off the rails, and that's in the press. So for us, it's like, oh, what's this? And the reality is, it mightn't be a huge amount. It might be just struggling for a bit of form, maybe a few niggles, maybe a little bit unhappy in his own mind about how things are going, uncertainty about a new coach, etc., etc. Could be anything. But the most important thing is it gets sorted out.
Last thing we'll touch on Ulster as well. I was commentating on their game against La Rochelle on Saturday, and to be honest, once the hour mark hit and it was still scoreless, I was kind of hoping we'd get 0-0 for full time, just for the sheer novelty of it. But look, it's another defeat for Ulster, Sean, and hugely disappointing, obviously. But I thought they looked, in terms of mentality and in terms of their intent and the way they approached the game, I thought they actually looked miles above what they had for a couple of weeks on Saturday, given how bad those conditions were against La Rochelle.
Yeah, what a game to be commentating on. I was watching it out of sheer interest. Yeah, look, it was. They brought an incredible attitude down there, going down to the home of the champions. Obviously, look, the weather conditions were appalling, but again, they're the days we need to front up in terms of application around the maul. Like, you're going up against a massive pack, the scrum. So they fought and they battled right till the end. They were so unlucky. That last minute pick and go reminded me of another try they got last season. So to sneak the win. But yeah, look, there's definitely green shoots there for them to bring into this week, to try and build some confidence on. And like I said, half the battle sometimes to try and get confidence going is just looking back and showing we all bought in. We battled for 80 minutes, we fought for each other, and then just try and bring something out of that for the following week.
Yeah, and Birch, like, I know it's probably an indictment maybe of the format in the Champions Cup, but even after 3 defeats, their bonus points are keeping them in it. And with Sale this weekend and the Claremont away to the Stormers down in South Africa, there's a very, very good chance that if Ulster win on Saturday against Sale, they will be in the last 16. There's a very, very good chance of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. It's amazing the new format and how easy it is to. It's actually harder to miss out, I think. But no, I didn't look at it. I actually don't think that's the be all and end all for them. It's actually just getting back on track, and being able to, I suppose, take heart from that game. So the problem for me is when the weather was as bad as that, and La Rochelle went, mixed their team up a little bit. It's okay. It's testing your heart and your desire, but it's not really a test of some of the issues that have been affecting them, which is a lack of cohesion in attack and a pretty porous defense, and in terms of making bad reads on the edges. So, that's something that I'm fascinated to see. Can they fix? And if they fix it, they can go and have a really good end of season in the URC and fight for a top, for a home draw. And if they get back to where they were at pre-Leinster, no one would want to draw them. You know what I mean? Like, they were very, very close to getting to a final last year in the URC. And for me, that's I look at, they're not, obviously they could win a Champions Cup, but realistically, do I see them win it? Certainly not at the moment. So I think the most important thing is that they just get that performance that gives them confidence going into Stormers next week in Ravenhill, which is the last game before the international break, and then come back out of the international break as a back to where they were at.
And just final point on Ulster then as well, Birch. They've continued their recruitment for next season. Dave Ewers joining from Exeter, real veteran, more than 200 games for Exeter, a couple of Premiership titles and a Champions Cup as well. And whatever I've seen of Exeter over the last few years when he's been playing, they've played against Munster a couple of times last season, and they played Leinster the season before that. He's a hard as nails back row. Yeah,
very good signing. Probably unfortunate not to be involved with England. Obviously, Zimbabwean born, but he's a good signing. And again, it's worrying for Exeter when you see they're losing Luke Cowan-Dickey. They're losing someone like Dave Ewers, who's been huge for them, a talisman for them. And it's down to the salary cap, limitations. But from an Ulster point of view, I think he's a good signing. I don't think Vermeulen was a like for Coetzee in terms of his ability with ball in hand and giving him that punch. Now, Ewers isn't a Coetzee either, but he's a very effective ball carrier. And yeah, you know what you're going to get with him. And I think that's a good bit of business.
Is he someone you came across? I know you had I can't remember where you played in that 2021 quarterfinal, Sean, but did you come across him? I know you'd pool stage games against Exeter down the years as well. Is he someone you played against much?
Yeah, no, he's like you said, hard as nails. Again, he'll add a lot in terms of his maul, like very strong in the maul, setting the maul, getting that punch forward. Really good in around the tight in 22 exchanges. So he'll be a really good sign. Again, mightn't give the ball carrying nous of a Coetzee, but really good bit of business. Again, coming from a real good, I suppose, culturally sound setup in Exeter, where built on success, and he'll bring a bit of that to the setup in Ulster as well. So yeah, looks like a good bit of business. But yeah, Exeter losing a lot of players. Jack Noel as well, potentially on the way out. So yeah, no, it's good. It's a good bit of business, and I could see him doing well in Ulster.
All right, it's going to be interesting to see that. Fellas, thanks a million for joining us. I think we've crammed a fair degree into the last 50 minutes. We've done pretty well to keep on a tight schedule. But for those who want to find out a little bit more about the permutations for this weekend in the Champions Cup, I've done all of those up there on rte.ie/sport. There are a lot of different outcomes and a lot of different ways that we can get there. So if you want to figure out what your province needs, go have a look at that as well. A reminder as well, Leinster against Racing 92. That is live on RT2 and RT Player this Saturday evening as well, and also live coverage on RT Radio 1 of that game as well. But Sean and Birch, thanks a million for joining us, and enjoy the games at the weekend, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.